Why AI will reshape cyber jobs faster than the attackers will. I recently had a chance to be a moderator for a roundtable of chief information security officers. And I posed the question, is artificial intelligence just another app for your organization, or is it something you want to be in charge of? Almost every CISO said it's just another app. They don't want to be in charge of it. I completely disagree with this. I think it's the wrong attitude. I think as cyber practitioners, we need to be way ahead of the artificial intelligence game in our organization, or else we're going to get outsourced. We will get replaced by the actual AI that we're probably trying to secure. Now, why should you listen to me? My name is Ron Gula. I'm the president of Gula Tech Adventures. I've invested several $100 million into cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and national security companies. Before that, I was the CEO of Tenable Network Security, where my job was to create a company that could measure vulnerabilities in the cloud, in large enterprises, for consultants, and mobile devices. And before that, I worked for the National Security Agency as a penetration tester. So I've been in this industry almost 30 years. I see where it's going, and I have advice if you watch this video for chief information security officers, cyber practitioners, and cyber startup founders out there. All right, so I'm recording this in 2026 of January. What is going on? What are the trends? Well, one, even though we had a president, Donald Trump, who just kind of acknowledged a cyber attack on Venezuela, he didn't actually say that, but a lot of cyber experts are saying that this is sort of the first time a president has said that we have a speciality in doing this. I'm not so sure that that's the case, and I'm not so sure that the general public looks at that as a reason to patch their Windows computers. They look at cybersecurity as it's somebody else's problem. There's a lot of apathy and confusion out there for people outside of cybersecurity. Even if Cyber Command gets promoted to Cyberforce, which I think is going to happen, I still don't think the general public is going to tie that they have a role in protecting our water and our data and so on. But having said that, there's a lot of trends that are going to make it easier for them to sort of get by with this apathy. So the first one is that, look, after 30 years, Microsoft and Google and Apple and Amazon, people are paying attention to cybersecurity. There are less exploitable vulnerabilities and a lot better cybersecurity across all those platforms. I'm going to turn over to my artificial intelligence counterpart, Ron, to go into that for a little bit more detail.
Hey there, Ron here. Is there real evidence that Google, Microsoft, and Apple technology is safer in 2026 than in years past? Point one, memory safety. On Android, memory safety vulnerabilities dropped from roughly 75% in 2019 to about 25% by 2024, which matters because memory bugs are among the most dangerous to exploit. Point two, zero-day exploitation. In the wild, zero-day attacks against browsers and mobile operating systems have declined, while attackers increasingly shift toward enterprise infrastructure instead. Point three, secure defaults. Vendors are raising the security baseline through phishing-resistant authentication and hardware-based trust, removing entire classes of common attacks. Point four, measuring real risk. Raw CVE counts don't measure safety because they reflect disclosure volume rather than real-world exploitation. Point five, targeted attacks. Apple platforms still face highly sophisticated targeted attacks that are expensive, deliberate, and aimed at specific individuals rather than mass compromise. So across 5 overall areas, major platforms are safer in measurable ways in 2026, with fewer high-risk bugs, higher default defenses, and attackers push toward narrower and more costly paths.
Now, that's just kind of some stuff that's easy to compute, but what's some evidence? Well, one, we're actually seeing a lot less ransomware payments. Ransomware, even in this environment of people who are not patching and not really doing things in a compliant manner, we're still seeing a downward trend in ransomware. Now, I'd like to believe maybe Cyber Command or the NSA is kicking butt and shutting down those groups and making it easy for international law enforcement to arrest those folks. But I generally think there's a lot harder targets out there. We're also seeing a lot less cyber payments to insurance companies. That's down as well. So a second thing that's happening with the general public is that it's becoming easier to be compliant. And I kind of call this, it's click to compliant, but basically there's companies out there that make it easy for small shops and big shops to quickly be compliant with a standard such as CMMC or PCI or HIPAA, or even just like the NIST cybersecurity framework, or even the Center for Internet Security standards that are out there. Now, these companies really make it easy for organizations to basically get a hold of all their assets, make sure they're hardened, make sure there's some sort of protection and defenses on them, and makes it easier to monitor and respond. These things are happening. Now, is it the best cybersecurity that you could have? Maybe, maybe not. Is it going to be something that makes the entire industry harder to attack? Yes. I kind of like every small company who does business with the DoD to have two-factor authentication, have some sense of security of what's going on out there. So this is going to happen as well. Now, the third thing that's going to happen is that if you're doing business as a customer and you're buying cyber products from places like Palo Alto, places like CrowdStrike, places like Cisco, places like Checkpoint, all of these companies are platforms now where they offer many, many, many different things. You got firewalls, EDRs, SIMs, you got threat feeds, you got orchestration tools, you got anti-phishing, you got DNS, you got secure web browsing. These companies have become platforms that allow people to have deployments that work together in a fairly seamless fashion. And even if these enterprises don't deploy a 100% Palo Alto solution or 100% CrowdStrike solution, there's a new generations of SOARs and SIMs leveraging AI that allows multiple different types of technologies to work together. This is also going to lead to more basically apathy where, why am I secure? I'm secure because I have CrowdStrike. I'm secure because I have Microsoft. I'm secure because I have Palo Alto. Security becomes the vendor that you chose and not necessarily your strategy. And this is going to eat away. We've become a self-licking ice cream cone as a industry where we keep telling people, buy our products, buy our platforms. We're going to make you secure. Well, the cool thing is that the AI is going to allow these large organizations to have a really, really good visibility, not only across their customers, but across all of the processes that go on within an organization. And if you ever hear Chris Inglis say, if you have to beat one of us, you have to beat all of us. This is kind of what we're talking about. So look, not only are we seeing the exploits for Apple and ransomware going down, not only are we going to see people get more compliant, we're going to see these larger enterprises have a harder time to be hacked because of all the different artificial intelligence and coordination that's going on. Now, look, if you're not in the large enterprise, you probably are going to get a very, very similar technology from your MSP, from your MDR, or from your MSSP. All of those markets are kind of merging, and maybe you don't have a large enough company where you have your own security staff. Maybe you've outsourced this to a company. Those technologies look a whole lot like what Palo Alto does and what Sophos does and what CrowdStrike does on the inside. Research teams, technologies, managing other folks, but basically offering a very, very similar technology as far as being able to look at multiple sensors and making sense out of multiple different things going on in your organization. Now, the last trend that's going on is the big obvious one, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is coming into our organizations and it's going to take over. We're already seeing organizations replace business processes with AI processes. Could be in customer support, could be in marketing, could be in accounting, could be in cybersecurity. We're seeing a lot of this happening. And this is, I think, one of the biggest things that's going to impact our industry. How it's going to impact, when it's going to impact, nobody really knows. But personally in cyber, I think if you're new to this business, you're having a hard time finding that first cyber job because most organizations have moved having their senior people from them managing junior people to having them manage artificial intelligence, having agentic AI, having the ability to automate triage and processes so that it's less human dependent. You don't have this bottleneck of an analyst doing analytics. You basically have artificial intelligence doing triage and response for you at machine speed. We're going to see that kind of impact across every other vertical. So now it comes to the point where, with that stage set, what is going to happen to the organizations out there, people doing cyber? So first, look, if you're a CISO and your job is to buy CrowdStrike, you're probably going to get outsourced. You, believe it or not, are in competition with CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike is probably going to come to your organization one day, or Palo or Checkpoint, and basically offer your CFO and your CEO, let me manage your security for you, and we will make your world a better place, right? This is the where people are going. If you actually instrument everything and you have full control of all that, it's going to be pretty easy to say, well, why do I need to have a chief information security officer do that? Now, this is pretty controversial, but if you think about small business outsourcing to an MDR or an MSSP, look, when you get to a large enterprise, if you're a bank, you're still going to need access control. You're still going to need, that sort of stuff, but you're going to probably outsource detection and monitoring and compliance auditing and all that sort of stuff. That's going to be something very easy to do for an AI. Now, why should a CISO be in charge of AI? You want to get ahead of this for a couple of reasons. One, we've sort of been doing this already as an industry. If you're a chief information security officer, you've already had the struggles of which business processes within cyber to give to a human or to give to a computer, to give to an algorithm, to automate. When you think about the ethics involved with that, when you think about the effects, the efficiency, and the effectiveness of that, that's a mentality that you don't really see in other groups inside an organization. You could probably argue marketing a little bit, but certainly not legal, certainly not HR, certainly not those other groups. So being a cyber leader, basically saying, look, I want to be in charge of AI, it's really important. The second thing that a CISO is really good at for running AI is like, look, you're probably going to be making decisions about which AIs do I use in-house? Do I get my own LLMs and run them locally? Which cloud providers do I use? Those are going to be business decisions that have to be backed up with security, compliance, the end user license agreement, understanding who has access to the data and when. This is something cyber people need to understand really well. The AI transformation for business, this is more than just using Salesforce for your sales processes, your customer support. This is talking about every business that you have, every business process being something that you need to be in charge of and making those decisions, understanding that whether it's a customer support facing thing, whether it's an internal partner platform, whether it's something that's just even simple like a public website, making the decisions about confidentiality, integrity, and availability for all of that data is something that CISOs do day in and day out. And this is not, what the business is going to be AI. If you're not in charge of that, you are going to get outsourced because whoever's in charge of that's going to say, look, I can probably just coordinate CrowdStrike with an AI or coordinate Microsoft with an AI. I might not need to have an expensive chief information security officer do that sort of thing. So look, if you're a CISO, this is what you should be aspiring for. You should be looking to run the AI program. Now, lastly, of course, what goes into AI? If you're making your own AI, you have software. That code needs to be created, curated, third parties, who do I partner with and whatnot. That's right up the CISO's alley. The data has to be curated and protected. Again, who has access to that data? Again, a very, very CISO-centric type of application. And then, of course, if you're going to operate it and run it and have the metrics to do those sort of things, you need to have that kind of background and do that. So look, a lot of CISOs, if I was making this video 3 years ago, I would have said a CISO should be aspiring to be the CIO. But now I'm saying, look, the CISO should be really aspiring to be in charge of the AI for the business. Now, that's great if you're a CISO. What if you're a practitioner? Look, if you're a practitioner, you actually have the best of both worlds. On one hand, you still have to learn all the fundamentals of cybersecurity, right? You have to understand the theory, confidentiality, integrity, availability, compliance. What is a penetration testing? What is vulnerability? What is incident response? What is malware? What is all that sort of stuff? And then you have to also learn, how do I manage that with AI? How can I do integrations? What is my common operating model for doing that? And if you think that there's going to be SOC jobs in the future and that sort of things, it's going to get automated. It's absolutely going to get automated. So your role should be more about, how can I use AI to get more value from my cyber tools? Now, this is where I see a sort of a big opportunity for cyber education. If the future is managing platforms like Microsoft and Google and Apple, and then looking at the security of them through a Palo Alto, through a CrowdStrike, through a Checkpoint, through a Tenable, through a Sentinel-1, through a big platform like that, it's kind of hard to get that experience. So what should you do early on? You should try to get experience with those platforms as quickly as you can in your theory. So you can pick up certifications. You can pick up, if you can get a job, even an entry level job where you don't have Palo Alto experience, but you can get it at this thing. You think about your resume as doing that, where you want to build out those technologies. And then you want to make sure that if you do get exposed to a platform like Palo Alto or a platform like CrowdStrike or platforms like Google, that you get exposed to all of the technologies as possible. There's a firewall team, and then there's a malware team, and there's an email security team. You really want to make your rounds and understand those things. Now, the good part about AI is you don't have to be that much of an expert in all those areas. You really want to be a generalist. You want to understand the limits and the strengths of every one of those technologies. Now, lastly, for cyber startup founders, what should you be doing? Well, look, the future is platformization, right? You are probably going to be acquired by Apollo, a Sentinel-1, a Zscaler, a CrowdStrike, that sort of thing. So why would they acquire you? You can't just do something a little bit better than they do. I've done previous videos on why cyber products that are 5% better than other products aren't really justifiable. You need to have something that's tremendously different than what they do. It's got to either be cheaper, better, or faster. And you've got to quantify those things. So for example, Sandfly is one of our investments. It's an agentless Linux EDR. It SSHs into Linux boxes, and it audits them for malware and backdoors, including things like the Chinese libpcap exploit. All the other products in this market do it with an agent. Now, that's a really big difference, right? So you need to have a really, really compelling reason why your startup needs to exist. And if you don't have something like that, if you're just faster and you can't quantify why you're faster, if you say, I'm just cheaper, but you can't say why I'm cheaper, that's really what you have to work on. And if you can do those things, it's going to be easier for you to get customers, because they're going to have to justify in this future that's more and more productized, more and more platformized. Why would I justify using a new email security solution or a new authentication solution if I can get everything I can get already from Palo, Cisco, and so on? So you have to really justify what you're doing now and why it's better more than ever before. All right. So we covered a lot of ground here. Some of this stuff's kind of controversial. If you're a CISO, you should be in charge of AI. If you're a cyber practitioner, you should be leveraging AI to do your cybersecurity. But you can't forsake your cybersecurity basics while you're going on this journey. And lastly, if you're a cybersecurity founder at a startup, you have to make sure what you're doing is just not 5% better than the incumbent technology out there. It's got to be a fundamentally different opportunity for somebody to justify what they're doing. I'm Ron Gula. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have comments, leave them below. I'd love to hear from you. And I wish everybody have a great week. Remember, you can't have good AI without good cybersecurity. Thanks for watching.